Pinocchio, chapters 31 to 36.
Pinocchio, chapter 31. It appears Pinocchio has escaped study and is now in a land of toys. Will he ever keep his promise to the good fairy and go back to school? Finally, the wagon arrived. It made no noise, for its wheels were bound with straw and rags. It was drawn by 12 pairs of donkeys, all of the same size, but all of a different colour. Some were grey, others white, and still others a mixture of brown and black. Here and there were a few with large yellow and blue stripes. The strangest thing of all was that those 24 donkeys, instead of being iron-shod like any other beast or burden, had on their feet laced shoes made of leather, just like the ones boys wear. And the driver of the wagon? Imagine to yourself a little fat man, much wider than he was long, round and shiny as a ball of butter, with a face beaming like an apple, a little mouth that always smiled, and a voice small and wheedling, like that of a cat begging for food. No sooner did any boy see him than he fell in love with him, and nothing satisfied him but to be allowed to ride in his wagon to that lovely place called the Land of Toys. In fact, the wagon was so closely packed with boys of all ages that it looked like a box of sardines. They were uncomfortable. They were piled one on top of the other. They could hardly breathe, yet not one word of complaint was heard. The thought that in a few hours they were to reach a country where there were no schools, no books, no teachers, made these boys so happy that they felt neither hungry, nor thirsty, nor sleepy, nor any discomfort. No sooner had the wagon stopped than the little fat man turned to Lampwick with bows and smiles. He asked in a wheedling tone, "Tell me, my fine boy, do you also want to come to my wonderful country?" "Indeed I do. But I warn you, my little dear, there's no more room in the wagon. It is full." "Never mind," answered Lampwick. "If there's no room inside, I can sit on top of the couch." And with one leap, he perched himself there. "What about you, my love?" asked the little man, turning politely to Pinocchio. "What are you going to do? Will you come with us? Or do you stay here?" "I stay here," answered Pinocchio. "I want to return home, as I prefer to study and to succeed in life." "May that bring you luck." "Pinocchio!" Lampwick called out. "Listen to me. Come with us, and we'll always be happy." "No, no, no! Come with us, and we'll always be happy," cried 4 other voices from the wagon. "Come with us, and we'll always be happy," shouted the 100 and more boys in the wagon, all together. "And if I go with you, what will my good fairy say?" asked the marionette, who was beginning to waver and weaken in his good resolutions. "Don't worry so much. Only think that we are going to a land where we shall be allowed to make all the racket we like from morning till night." Pinocchio did not answer, but sighed deeply once, twice, a third time. Finally he said, "Make room for me. I want to go too." "The seats are all filled," answered the little man. "But to show you how much I think of you, take my place as coachman." "And you?" "I'll walk." "No, indeed. I could not permit such a thing. I much prefer riding one of these donkeys," cried Pinocchio. No sooner said than done. He approached the first donkey and tried to mount it. But the little animal turned suddenly and gave him such a terrible kick in the stomach that Pinocchio was thrown to the ground and fell with his leg in the air. At this unlooked-for entertainment, the whole company of runaways laughed uproariously. The little fat man did not laugh. He went up to the rebellious animal and, still smiling, bent over him lovingly and bit off half of his right ear. In the meantime, Pinocchio lifted himself up from the ground and with one leap landed on the donkey's back. The leap was so well taken that all the boys shouted, "Hurrah for Pinocchio!" and clapped their hands in hearty applause. Suddenly, the little donkey gave a kick with his two hind feet at this unexpected move. The poor Pinocchio found himself once again sprawling right in the middle of the road. Again the boys shouted with laughter, but the little man, instead of laughing, became so loving towards the little animal that, with another kiss, he bit off half of his left ear. "You can mount now, my boy," he then said to Pinocchio. "Have no fear. That donkey was worried about something, but I have spoken to him, and now he seems quiet and reasonable." Pinocchio mounted, and the wagon started on its way. While the donkeys galloped along the stony road, the marionette fancied he heard a very quiet voice whispering to him. "Poor silly, you have done as you wished, but you are going to be a sorry boy before long." Pinocchio, greatly frightened, looked about him to see where the words had come from, but he saw no one. The donkeys galloped, the wagons rolled on smoothly, the boys slept, Lampwick snored like a dormouse, and the little fat driver sang sleepily between his teeth. After a mile or so, Pinocchio again heard the same faint voice whispering, "Remember, little simpleton, boys who stop studying and turn their backs upon books and schools and teachers in order to give all their time to nonsense and pleasure, sooner or later come to grief. Oh, how well I know this, how well I can prove it to you. The day will come when you will weep bitterly, even as I am weeping now, but it will be too late." At these whispered words, the marionette grew more and more frightened. He jumped to the ground, ran up to the donkey on whose back he had been riding, and taking his nose in his hand, looked at him. Think how great was his surprise when he saw that the donkey was weeping just like a boy. "Hey, Mr. Driver," cried the marionette. "Do you know what strange thing is happening here? The donkey weeps." "Let him weep. When he gets married, he will have time to laugh." "Have you perhaps taught him to speak?" "No. He learned to mumble a few words when he lived for 3 years with a band of trained dogs." "Poor beast!" "Come, come," said the little man. "Do not lose time over a donkey that can weep. Mount quickly and let us go. The night is cool and the road is long." Pinocchio obeyed without another word. The wagon started again. Toward dawn the next morning, they finally reached that much longed-for country, the land of toys. This land was so entirely different from any other place in the world. Its population, large though it was composed wholly of boys. The oldest were about 14 years of age, the youngest 8. In the street there was such a racket, such shouting, such blowing of trumpets that it was deafening. Everywhere groups of boys were gathered together. Some played at marbles, at hopscotch, at ball. Others rode on bicycles or on wooden horses. Some played at blind man's buff, others at tag. Here a group played circus, Here another sang and recited. A few turned somersaults, others walked on their hands with their feet in the air. Generals in full uniforms leading regiments of cardboard soldiers passed by. Laughter, shrieks, howls, catcalls, hand-clapping followed this parade. One boy made a noise like a hen, another like a rooster, and a third imitated a lion in his den. All together they created such a pandemonium that it would have been necessary for you to put cotton in your ears. The squares were filled with small wooden theatres and overflowing with boys from morning till night, and on the walls of the houses, written with charcoal, were words like these: "Hurrah for the land of toys! Down with arithmetic! No more school!" As soon as they had set foot in that land, Pinocchio, Lampwick, and all the other boys who had travelled with them started out on a tour of investigation. They wandered everywhere. They looked into every nook and corner, house and theatre. They became everybody's friend. Who could be happier than they? What with entertainments and parties, the hours, the days, the weeks passed like lightning. "Oh, what a beautiful life this is!" said Pinocchio, each time that by chance he met his friend Lampwick. "Was I right or wrong?" answered Lampwick. "And to think you did not want to come. To think that even yesterday the idea came into your head to return home to see your fairy and to start studying again. If today you're free from pencils and books and school, you owe it to me, to my advice, to my care. Do you admit it? Only true friends count, after all." "It's true, Lampwick, it's true. I really am a happy boy. It's all because of you. And to think that the teacher, when speaking of you, used to say, 'Do not go with that Lampwick. He is a bad companion, and some day he will lead you astray.'" "Poor teacher," answered the other, nodding his head. "Indeed, I know how much he disliked me, and how he enjoyed speaking ill of me. But I am of a generous nature, and I gladly forgive him." "Great soul!" said Pinocchio, fondly embracing his friend. 5 months passed, and the boys continued playing and enjoying themselves from morning till night without ever seeing a book or a desk or a school. But, my children, there came a morning when Pinocchio awoke and found a very great surprise awaiting for him, a surprise which made him feel very unhappy, as you shall see. Pinocchio's life has always been full of surprises, but what could possibly happen next? Pinocchio, Chapter 32. It's been all play and no work for Pinocchio in the land of toys. And life is about to teach him a lesson. Everyone at one time or another has found some surprise awaiting for him of the kind which Pinocchio had on that eventful morning of his life. But there are few. What was it? I will tell you, my dear little readers. On awakening, Pinocchio put his hand up to his head, and there he found... Guess! He found that during the night his ears had grown at least 10 full inches. You must know that the marionette, even from his birth, had very small ears, so small indeed that to the naked eye they could hardly be seen. Fancy how he felt when he noticed that overnight those 2 dainty organs had become as long as shoe brushes. He went in search of a mirror, but not finding any, he just filled a basin with water and looked at himself. There he saw what he never could have wished to see. His manly figure was adorned and enriched by a beautiful pair of donkey's ears. I leave you to think of the terrible grief, the shame, the despair of the poor little marionette. He began to cry, to scream, to knock his head against the wall, but the more he shrieked, the longer and the more hairy grew his ears. At those piercing shrieks, a dormouse came into the room, a fat little dormouse who lived upstairs. Seeing Pinocchio so grief-stricken, she asked him anxiously, "What is the matter, dear little neighbour?" "I am sick, my little dormouse, very, very sick, from an illness which frightens me. Do you understand how to feel the pulse?" "A little." "Feel mine then, and tell me if I have a fever." The dormouse took Pinocchio's wrist between her paws, and after a few minutes looked up at him sorrowfully and said, "My friend, I'm sorry, but I must give you some very sad news." "What is it?" "You have a very bad fever." "But what fever is it?" "The donkey fever." "I don't know anything about that fever," answered the marionette, beginning to understand even too well what was happening to him. "Then I will tell you about it," said the dormouse. "Know then that within 2 or 3 hours you will no longer be a marionette, nor a boy." "What shall I be?" "In 2 or 3 hours you will become a real donkey, just like the ones that pull the fruit carts to market." "Oh, what have I done? What have I done?" cried Pinocchio, grasping his 2 long ears in his hands and pulling and tugging at them angrily, just as if they belonged to another. "My dear boy," answered the dormouse to cheer him up a bit, "why worry now? What is done cannot be undone, you know. Fate has decreed that all lazy boys who come to hate books and schools and teachers and spend all their day with toys and games must sooner or later turn into donkeys." "But is it really so?" asked the marionette, sobbing bitterly. "I am sorry to say that it is, and tears now are useless. You should have thought of all this before." "But the fault is not mine. Believe me, little dormouse, the fault is all Lampwick's." "And who is this Lampwick?" "A classmate of mine. I wanted to return home. I wanted to be obedient. I wanted to study and to succeed in school. But Lampwick said to me, 'Why do you waste your time in studying? Why do you want to go to school? Come with me to the land of toys. There we will never study again. There we will enjoy ourselves and be happy from morn till night.' And why did you follow the advice of that false friend?" "Why? Because, my dear little dormouse, I'm a heedless little marionette, heedless and heartless. Oh, if only I had a bit of heart, I should never have abandoned that fairy who loved me so well and who has been so kind to me. And by this time, I should no longer be a marionette. I should have become a real boy, like all these friends of mine. Oh, if I meet Lampwick, I'm going to tell him what I think of him, and more too." After this long speech, Pinocchio walked to the door of the room, but when he reached it, remembering his donkey's ears, he felt ashamed to show them to the public, and turned back. He took a large cotton bag from a shelf, put it on his head, pulled it far down to his very nose. Thus adorned, he went out. He looked for Lampwick everywhere, along the streets and the squares, inside the theatres, everywhere, but he was not to be found. He asked everyone whom he met about him, but no one had seen him. In desperation, he returned home and knocked at the door. "Who is it?" asked Lampwick from within. "It is I," answered the marionette. "Wait a minute." After a full half-hour, the door opened. Another surprise awaited Pinocchio. There in the room stood his friend, with a large cotton bag on his head, pulled far down to his very nose. At the sight of that bag, Pinocchio felt slightly happier and thought to himself, "My friend must be suffering from the same sickness that I am. I wonder if he, too, has donkey fever." But pretending he had seen nothing, he asked with a smile, "How are you, my dear Lampwick?" "Very well, like a mouse and a Parmesan cheese." "Is that really true?" "Why should I lie to you?" "I beg your pardon, my friend, but then why are you wearing that cotton bag over your ears?" "The doctor has ordered it because one of my knees hurts." "And you, dear Marionette, why are you wearing that cotton bag down to your nose?" "The doctor has ordered it because I have bruised my foot." "Oh, my poor Pinocchio. Oh, my poor Lampwick." An embarrassingly long silence followed these words, during which time the two friends looked at each other in a mocking way. Finally, the Marionette, in a voice sweet as honey and soft as a flute, said to his companion, "Tell me, Lampwick, dear friend, have you ever suffered from an earache?" "Never." "And you?" "Never. Still, since this morning, my ear has been torturing me. So has mine. Yours too? And which ear is it?" "Both of them." "And yours?" "Both of them too. I wonder if it could be the same sickness." "I'm afraid it is." "Will you do me a favour, Lampwick?" "Gladly, with my whole heart." "Will you let me see your ears?" "Why not? But before I show you mine, I want to see yours, dear Pinocchio." "No, you must show me yours first." "No, my dear, you first, then mine." "Well then," said the Marionette, "let us make a contract. Let's hear the contract. Let us take off our caps together. All right?" "All right." "Ready then." Pinocchio began to count. 1, 2, 3. At the word 3, the two boys pulled off their caps and threw them high in the air. And then a scene took place which is hard to believe, but all too true. The Marionette and his friend Lampwick, when they saw each other both stricken by the same misfortune, instead of feeling sorrowful and ashamed, began to poke fun at each other. And after much nonsense, they ended by bursting out into hearty laughter. They laughed and laughed and laughed again, laughed till they ached, laughed till they cried. But all of a sudden, Lampwick stopped laughing. He tottered and almost fell, pale as a ghost. He turned to Pinocchio and said, "Help! Help, Pinocchio! What is the matter?" "Oh, help me! I can no longer stand up." "I can't either," cried Pinocchio, and his laughter turned to tears as he stumbled about helplessly. They had hardly finished speaking when both of them fell on all fours and began running and jumping around the room. As they ran, their arms turned into legs, their faces lengthened into snouts, and their backs became covered with long grey hairs. This was humiliation enough, but the most horrible moment was the one in which the two poor creatures felt their tails appear. Overcome with shame and grief, they tried to cry and bemoan their fate. But what is done can't be undone. Instead of moans and cries, they burst forth into loud donkey brays, which sounded very much like "Haw, haw, haw." At that moment, a loud knocking was heard at the door, and a voice called to them. "Open! I am the little man, the driver of the wagon which brought you here. Open, I say, or beware!" Poor little Pinocchio and his friend Lampwick have turned into donkeys. Let's see if this humiliation will lead them anywhere better. In the next chapter of Pinocchio, chapter 33. Poor Pinocchio has become a donkey. Let's see if he can learn any new tricks when he joins the circus. Very sad and downcast were the two poor little fellows as they stood and looked at each other. Outside the room, the little man grew more and more impatient, and finally gave the door such a violent kick that it flew open. With his usual sweet smile on his lips, he looked at Pinocchio and Lampwick and said to them, "Fine work, boys! You have brayed well, so well that I recognize your voices immediately, and here I am." On hearing this, the two donkeys bowed their heads in shame, dropped their ears, and put their tails between their legs. At first, the little man petted and caressed them, and smoothed down their hairy coats. Then he took out a currycomb and worked over them till they shone like glass. Satisfied with the looks of the two little animals, he bridled them and took them to a marketplace far away from the land of toys, in the hope of selling them at a good price. In fact, he did not have to wait very long for an offer. Lampwick was bought by a farmer whose donkey had died the day before. Pinocchio went to the owner of a circus, who wanted to teach him to do tricks for his audiences. And now, do you understand what the little man's profession was? This horrid little being, whose face shone with kindness, went about the world looking for boys. Lazy boys, boys who hated school, boys who wanted to run away from home, boys who were tired of school. All these were his joy and his fortune. He took them with him to the land of toys and let them enjoy themselves to their heart's content. When, after months of all play and no work, they became little donkeys, he sold them on the marketplace. In a few years, he had become a millionaire. What happened to Lampwick, my dear children? I do not know. Pinocchio, I can tell you, met with great hardships, even from the first day. After putting him in a stable, his new master filled his manger with straw, but Pinocchio, after tasting a mouthful, spat it out. Then the man filled the manger with hay, but Pinocchio did not like that any better. "Ah, you don't like hay either," he cried angrily. "Wait, my pretty little donkey. I'll teach you not to be so particular." Without more ado, he took a whip and gave the donkey a hearty blow across the legs. Pinocchio screamed with pain, and as he screamed he brayed, "Ha, ha, ha! Hay gives me a headache." "Do you pretend by any chance that I should feed you duck or chicken?" asked the man again, and angrier than ever, he gave Pinocchio another lashing. At that second beating, Pinocchio became very quiet and said no more. After that, the door of the stable was closed, and he was left alone. It was many hours since he had eaten anything, and he started to yawn from hunger. As he yawned, he opened a mouth as big as an oven. Finally, not finding anything else in the manger, he tasted the hay. After tasting it, he chewed it well, closed his eyes, and swallowed it. "This hay is not bad," he said to himself. But how much happier I should be if I had studied. Just now, instead of hay, I should be eating some good bread and butter. Patience! Next morning when he awoke, Pinocchio looked in the manger for more hay, but it was all gone. He had eaten it all during the night. He tried the straw, but as he chewed away at it, he noticed to his great disappointment that it tasted neither like rice nor like macaroni. Patience, he repeated as he chewed. Only my misfortune might serve as a lesson to disobedient boys who refuse to study. Patience, have patience. Patience indeed, shouted his master just then as he came into the stable. Do you think perhaps, my little donkey, that I have brought you here only to give you food and drink? Oh, no. You are to help me earn some fine gold pieces, do you hear? Come along now. I am going to teach you to jump and bow, to dance and waltz and polka, and even stand on your head. Poor Pinocchio, whether he liked it or not, had to learn all these wonderful things. But it took him 3 long months and cost him many, many lashings before he was pronounced perfect. The day came at last when Pinocchio's master was able to announce an extraordinary performance. The announcements, posted all around the town and written in large letters, read thus: Great spectacle tonight. Leaps and exercises by the great artist and the famous horses of the company. First public appearance of the famous donkey called Pinocchio, the star of the dance. The theatre will be as light as day. That night, as you can well imagine, the theatre was filled to overflowing 1 hour before the show was scheduled to start. Not even an orchestra chair could be had, not a balcony seat, nor a gallery seat, not even for their weight in gold. The place swarmed with boys and girls of all ages and sizes, wriggling and dancing about in a fever of impatience to see the famous donkey dance. When the first part of the performance was over, the owner and manager of the circus, in a black coat, white knee breeches and patent leather boots, presented himself to the public and in a loud, pompous voice made the following announcement. Most honoured friends, gentlemen and ladies, your humble servant, the manager of this theatre, presents himself before you tonight in order to introduce you to the greatest, the most famous donkey in the world. A donkey that has the great honour in his short life of performing before the kings and queens and emperors of all the great courts of Europe. We thank you for your attention. This speech was greeted by laughter and applause, and the applause grew to a roar when Pinocchio, the famous donkey, appeared in the circus ring. He was handsomely arrayed. A new bridle of shining leather with buckles of polished brass was on his back. 2 white camellias were tied to his ears. Ribbons and tassels of red silk adorned his mane, which was divided into many curls. A great sash of gold and silver was fastened around his waist, and his tail was decorated with ribbons of many brilliant colours. He was a handsome donkey indeed. The manager, when introducing him to the public, added these words: Most honoured audience, I shall not take your time tonight to tell you of the great difficulties which I have encountered while trying to tame this animal since I have found him in the wilds of Africa. Observe, I beg of you, the savage look of his eye. All the means used by centuries of civilization in subduing wild beasts failed in this case. I had finally to resort to the gentle language of the whip in order to bring him to my will. With all my kindness, however, I have succeeded in gaining my donkey's love. He is still today as savage as the day I found him. He still fears and hates me. But I have found in him one great redeeming feature. Do you see this little bump on his forehead? It is this bump which gives him his great talent of dancing and using his feet as nimbly as any human being. Admire him, O signori, and enjoy yourselves. I let you now be the judges of my success, that there will be another performance tomorrow night. If the weather threatens rain, the great spectacle will take place at 11 o'clock in the morning." The manager bowed and then turned to Pinocchio and said, "Ready, Pinocchio? Before starting your performance, salute your audience." Pinocchio obediently bent his 2 knees to the ground and remained kneeling until the manager, with a crack of the whip, cried sharply, "Walk!" The donkey lifted himself on his 4 feet and walked around the ring. A few minutes passed, and again the voice of the manager called, "Quick step!" And Pinocchio obediently changed his step. "Gallop!" And Pinocchio galloped. "Full speed!" And Pinocchio ran as fast as he could. As he ran, the master raised his arm and a pistol shot rang in the air. At the shot, the little donkey fell to the ground as if he were really dead. A shower of applause greeted the donkey as he rose to his feet. Cries and shouts and hand clappings were heard on all sides. At all this noise, Pinocchio lifted his head and raised his eyes. There, in front of him, in a box, sat a beautiful woman. Round her neck she wore a long gold chain, from which hung a large medallion. On the medallion was painted the picture of a marionette. "That picture is of me. That beautiful lady is my fairy," said Pinocchio to himself, recognizing her. He felt so happy that he tried his best to cry out, "Oh, my fairy! My own fairy!" But instead of words, a loud braying was heard in the theatre. So loud and so long that all the spectators, men and women and children, but especially the children, burst out laughing. Then, in order to teach the donkey that it was not good manners to bray before the public, the manager hit him on the nose with the handle of the whip. The poor little donkey struck out a long tongue and licked his nose for a long time in an effort to take away the pain. And what was his grief when, on looking up towards the boxes, he saw that the fairy had disappeared. He felt himself fainting, his eyes filled with tears, and he wept bitterly. No one knew it, however, least of all the manager, who was cracking his whip, cried out, "Bravo, Pinocchio! Now show us how gracefully you can jump through the rings." Pinocchio tried 2 or 3 times, but each time he came near the ring, he found it more to his taste to go under it. The 4th time, at a look from his master, he leaped through it. But as he did, his hind leg got caught in the ring and he fell to the floor in a heap. When he got up, he was lame, could hardly limp as far as the stable. "Pinocchio! We want Pinocchio! We want the little donkey!" cried the boys from the orchestra, saddened by the accident. No one saw Pinocchio again that evening. The next morning, the veterinary, that is, the animal doctor, declared that he would be lame for the rest of his life. "What do I want with a lame donkey?" said the manager to the stable boy. "Take him to the market and sell him." When they reached the square, a buyer was soon found. How much do you ask for that little lame donkey? He asked. $4. I'll give you 4 cents. Don't think I'm buying him for work. I want only his skin. It looks very tough. I can use it myself to make a drumhead. I belong to a musical band in my village, and I need a drum. As soon as the buyer had paid the 4 cents, the donkey changed hands. His new owner took him to a high cliff overlooking the sea, put a stone round his neck, tied a rope to one of his hind feet, gave him a push, and threw him into the water. Pinocchio sank immediately, and his new master sat on the cliff waiting for him to drown, so as to skin him and make himself a drumhead. Poor Pinocchio has not been treated well by the master at the circus, and he is now at a very dangerous moment. Let's hope he will survive the sea again. Pinocchio, Chapter 34. Pinocchio is thrown into the sea again. What with fishes and sharks, he will be a lucky little puppet to survive. Down into the sea, deeper and deeper, sank Pinocchio. And finally, after 15 minutes of waiting, the man on the cliff said to himself, "By this time my poor little lame donkey must be drowned. Up with him, and then I can get to work on my beautiful drum." He pulled the rope which he had tied to Pinocchio's leg, pulled and pulled and pulled, and at last he saw appear on the surface of the water. Can you guess what? Instead of a donkey, he saw a very much alive marionette, wriggling and squirming like an eel. Seeing that wooden marionette, the poor man thought he was dreaming, and sat there with his mouth wide open and his eyes popping out of his head. Gathering his wits together, he said, "And the donkey I threw into the sea?" "I am that donkey," answered the marionette, laughing. "You?" "I." "Ah, you little cheat! Are you poking fun at me?" "Poking fun at you? Not at all, dear master. I am talking seriously." "But then, how is it that you, who a few moments ago were a donkey, are now standing before me a wooden marionette?" "It may be the effect of the salt water. The sea is fond of playing these tricks." "Be careful, marionette, be careful. Don't laugh at me. Woe be to you if I lose my patience." "Well then, my master, do you want to know my whole story?" "Untie my leg, and I can tell it to you better." The old fellow, curious to know the true story of the marionette's life, immediately untied the rope which held his foot. Pinocchio, feeling free as a bird of the air, began his tale. "Know then that once upon a time I was a wooden marionette, just as I am today. One day I was about to become a boy, a real boy, but on account of my laziness and my hatred of books, and because I listened to bad companions, I ran away from home. One beautiful morning I awoke to find myself changed into a donkey, long ears, grey coat, even a tail. What a shameful day for me! I hope you will never experience one like it, dear master. I was taken to the fair and sold to a circus owner who tried to make me dance and jump through rings. One night, during a performance, I had a bad fall and became lame. Not knowing what to do with a lame donkey, the circus owner sent me to the marketplace, and you bought me." "Indeed I did, and I paid 4 cents for you. Now, who you will return my money to me." "But why do you buy me? You bought me to do me harm, to kill me, to make a drumhead out of me." "Indeed I did. And now where shall I find another skin?" "Never mind, dear master. There are so many donkeys in this world." "Tell me, impudent little rogue, does your story end here?" "One more word," answered the marionette, "and I am through. After buying me, you brought me here to kill me, but feeling sorry for me, you tied a stone to my neck and threw me to the bottom of the sea. That was very good and kind of you to want me to suffer as little as possible, and I shall remember you always. And now my fairy will take care of me, even if you—" "Your fairy? Who is she?" "She is my mother, and like all mothers who love their children, she never loses sight of me, even though I do not deserve it. And today, this good fairy of mine, as soon as she saw me in danger of drowning, sent 1,000 fishes to the spot where I lay. They thought I was really a dead donkey and began to eat me. What great bites they took! One ate my ears, another my nose, a third my neck, and my mane. Some went at my legs, and some at my back, and among the others there was one tiny little fish, so gentle and polite that he did me the great favour of eating my tail." "From now on," said the man, horrified, "I swear I shall never again taste a fish. How I should enjoy opening a mullet or a whitefish just to find there the tail of a dead donkey." "I think as you do," answered the marionette, laughing. "Still, you must know, when the fish finished eating my donkey coat, which covered me from head to foot, they naturally came to the bones, or rather, in my case, to the wood. For, as you know, I am made of very hard wood. After the first few bites, those greedy fish found out that the wood was not good for their teeth, and, afraid of indigestion, they turned and ran here and there, and without saying goodbye or even as much as a thank you to me. Here, dear master, you have my story. You know why you found a marionette and not a dead donkey when you pulled me out of the water." "I laugh at your story," cried the man angrily. "I know that I spent 4 cents to get you, and I want my money back. Do you know what I can do? I'm going to take you to the market once more and sell you as dry firewood." "Very well, sell me. I am satisfied," said Pinocchio. But as he spoke, he gave a quick leap and dived into the sea. Swimming away as fast as he could, he cried out, laughing, "Goodbye, master! If you ever need a skin for your drum, remember me!" He swam on and on. After a while, he turned round again and called out louder than before, "Goodbye, master! If you ever need a piece of good dry firewood, remember me!" In a few seconds he had gone so far he could hardly be seen. All that could be seen of him was a very small black dot moving swiftly on the blue surface of the water. A little black dot which now and then lifted a leg or an arm in the air. One would have thought that Pinocchio had turned into a porpoise, playing in the sun. After swimming for a long time, Pinocchio saw a rock in the middle of the sea, a rock as white as marble. High on the rock stood a little goat, bleating and calling and beckoning to the marionette to come to her. There was something very strange about that little goat. Her coat was not white or black or brown as that of any other goat, but azure, a deep, brilliant colour that reminded one of the hair of the lovely maiden. Pinocchio's heart beat fast, and then faster. He redoubled his efforts and swam as fast as he could toward the white rock. He was almost halfway over when suddenly a horrible sea monster stuck its head out of the water. An enormous head with a huge mouth wide open, showing rows of gleaming teeth, the mere sight of which would have filled you with fear. Do you know what it was? That sea monster was no other than the enormous shark, which has often been mentioned in this story and which, on account of its cruelty, had been nicknamed the Attila of the sea by both fish and fishermen. Poor Pinocchio! The sight of that monster frightened him almost to death. He tried to swim away from him, to change his path, to escape, but that immense mouth kept coming nearer and nearer. "Hey, son, Pinocchio! I beg you!" bleated the little goat on the high rock. And Pinocchio swam desperately with his arms, his body, his legs, his feet. "Quick, Pinocchio! The monster is coming nearer!" Pinocchio swam faster and faster and harder. "Faster, Pinocchio! The monster will get you! There he is! There he is! Quick, quick, or you are lost!" Pinocchio went through the water like a shot, swifter and faster. He came close to the rock. The goat leaned over and gave him one of her hooves to help him out of the water. Alas, it was too late. The monster overtook him, and the marionette found himself in between the rows of gleaming white teeth. Only for a moment, however, for the shark took a deep breath. As he breathed, he drank in the marionette as easily as he would have sucked an egg. Then he swallowed him so fast that Pinocchio, falling down into the body of the fish, lay stunned for half an hour. When he recovered his senses, the marionette could not remember where he was. All around him was darkness, a darkness so deep and so black that for a few moments he thought he had put his head into an inkwell. He listened for a few moments and heard nothing. Once in a while, a cold wind blew on his face. At first he could not understand where that wind was coming from, but after a while he understood that it came from the lungs of the monster. I forgot to tell you that the shark was suffering from asthma, so that whenever he breathed, a storm seemed to blow. Pinocchio at first tried to be brave, but as soon as he became convinced that he was really and truly in the shark's stomach, he burst into sobs and tears. "Help! Help! Oh, poor me! Oh, poor me! Won't somebody come to save me?"
"Who is there to help you, unhappy boy?"
said a rough voice, like a guitar out of tune. Who is talking?" asked Pinocchio, frozen with terror.
"It is I, a poor tunny, swallowed by the shark at the same time as you. What kind of a fish are you?"
"I have nothing to do with fishes. I am a marionette."
"If you are not a fish, why did you let this monster swallow you?"
"I didn't let him. He chased me and swallowed me without even a by your leave. And now what are we to do here in the darkness?"
"Wait until the shark has digested us both, I suppose."
But I don't want to be digested," shouted Pinocchio, starting to sob.
"Neither do I,"
said the tunny. "But I am wise enough to think that if one is born a fish, it is more dignified to die under the water than in the frying pan." "What nonsense!" cried Pinocchio.
Mine is an opinion,
replied the tunny.
and opinions ought to be respected.
But I want to get out of this place. I want to escape.
Go, if you can.
Is this shark that has swallowed us very long? Asked the marionette.
His body, not counting the tail, is almost a mile long.
While talking in the darkness, Pinocchio thought he saw a faint light in the distance.
What can that be?
He said to the tunny.
Some other poor fish, waiting as patiently as we to be digested by the shark.
I want to see him. He may be an old fish and may know some way of escape.
I wish you all good luck, dear marionette.
Goodbye, tunny.
Goodbye, marionette, and good luck.
Shall I see you again?
Who knows? It's better not to think about it.
And so Pinocchio is making plans to escape the shark's stomach instead of being digested. Let's hope his luck will continue to save him. Pinocchio, Chapter 35. Pinocchio, as soon as he had said goodbye to his friend the tunny, tottered away in the darkness and began to walk as well as he could toward the faint light which glowed in the distance. As he walked, his feet splashed in a pool of greasy, slippery water, which had such a heavy smell of fish fried in oil that Pinocchio thought it was Lent. The farther on he went, the brighter and clearer grew the tiny light. On and on he walked, till finally he found... I'll give you 1,000 guesses. My dear children, he found a little table set for dinner, and lighted by a candle stuck in a glass bottle. And near the table sat a little old man, white as the snow, eating live fish. They wriggled so that now and again one of them slipped under the old man's mouth and escaped into darkness under the table. At this sight, the poor marionette was filled with such great and sudden happiness that he almost dropped in a faint. He wanted to laugh, he wanted to cry, he wanted to say 1,001 things, but all he could do was to stand still, stuttering and stammering brokenly. At last, with a great effort, he was able to let out a scream of joy, and opening his arms, he threw them around the old man's neck. "Oh, Father, Father, have I found you at last? Now I shall never leave you again."
"Are my eyes really telling me the truth?"
answered the old man, rubbing his eyes.
"Are you really my own dear Pinocchio?"
Yes, it is I. Look at me. And you have forgiven me, haven't you? Oh, dear Father, how good you are. And to think that if only you knew how many misfortunes have fallen on my head and how many troubles I've had. Just think that on the day you sold your coat to buy me my ABC book so that I could go to school, I ran away to the Marionette Theatre, and the proprietor caught me and wanted to burn me, to cook me as roast lamb. He was the one that gave me the 5 gold pieces for you, and I met the fox and cat who took me to the inn of the Red Lobster. They ate like wolves, but I left the inn alone, and I met the assassins in the wood. I ran away, and they ran after me, always after me, until they hanged me from the branch of a giant oak tree. Then the fairy with the azure hair sent the coach to rescue me, and the doctor, after looking at me, said, "If he is not dead, then he is surely alive." And then I told a lie, and my nose began to grow. It grew and it grew, till I couldn't get it through the door of the room. And then I went with the fox and the cat to the field of wonders to bury the gold pieces. The parrot laughed at me, and instead of 2,000 gold pieces, I found none. And when the judge heard I had been robbed, he sent me to jail to make the thieves happy. And when I came away, I saw a fine bunch of grapes hanging on a vine. The trap caught me, and the farmer put a collar on me and made me a watchdog. He found out that I was innocent when I caught the weasels, and he let me go. And then the serpent with a tail that smoked started to laugh, and a vein in his chest broke. And so I went back to the fairy's house. She was dead, and the pigeon, seeing me crying, said to me,
I have seen your father building a boat to look for you in America.
and I said to him, oh, if only I had wings. And he said to me, do you want to go back to your father? And I said, perhaps, but how? And he said, get on my back, I'll take you there. And we flew all night long, and next morning the fishermen were looking toward the sea crying, there is a poor man, little man, drowning. And I knew it was you, because my heart told me so, and I waved to you from the shore.
I knew you also, put in Geppetto, and I wanted to go to you, but how could I? The sea was rough, and the white caps overturned the boat. Then a terrible shark came out of the sea, and as soon as he saw me in the water, swam quickly toward me, put out his tongue, and swallowed me as easily as if I'd been a chocolate peppermint.
And how long have you been shut away in here?
From this day to this day. 2 long weary years, 2 years, my Pinocchio, which have been like 2 centuries.
And how have you lived? Where did you find the candle? And the matches with which to light it? Where did you get them?
You must know, in the storm which swamped my boat, a large ship also suffered the same fate. The sailors were all saved, but the ship went right to the bottom of the sea, and the terrible shark that swallowed me swallowed most of it.
What? Swallowed a ship? Asked Pinocchio in astonishment.
At one gulp, the only thing he spat out was the mainmast, for it stuck in his teeth. To my own good luck, that ship was loaded with meat, preserved foods, crackers, bread, bottles of wine, raisins, cheese, coffee, sugar, wax candles, and boxes of matches. With all these blessings, I have been able to live happily on for 2 whole years. But now I am at the very last crumbs. Today there is nothing left in the cupboard. And this candle you see here is the last one I have.
And then?
And then, my dear, we'll find ourselves in darkness.
Then, my dear father, said Pinocchio, there is no time to lose. We must try to escape.
Escape? How?
We can run out of the shark's mouth and dive into the sea.
You speak well, but I cannot swim, my dear Pinocchio.
Why should that matter? You can climb on my shoulders, and I, who am a fine swimmer, will carry you safely to the shore.
Dreams, my boy, answered Geppetto, shaking his head and smiling sadly. Do you think it possible for a marionette, a yard high, to have the strength to carry me on his shoulders and swim?
Try it and see. And in any case, if it is written that we must both die, we shall at least die together.
Not adding another word, Pinocchio took the candle in his hand, and going ahead to light the way, he said to his father,
Follow me and have no fear.
They walked a long distance through the stomach and the whole body of the shark. When they reached the throat of the monster, they stopped for a while for the right moment in which to make their escape. I want you to know that the shark, being very old and suffering from asthma, and heart trouble, was obliged to sleep with his mouth open. Because of this, Pinocchio was able to catch a glimpse of the sky filled with stars as he looked up through the open jaws of his new home.
The time has come for us to escape,
he whispered, turning to his father.
The shark is fast asleep. The sea is calm, and the night is as bright as day.
Follow me closer, dear father, and we shall soon be saved. No sooner said than done. They climbed up the throat of the monster till they came to that immense open mouth. There they had to walk on tiptoes, for if they tickled the shark's long tongue, he might awaken. And where would they be then? The tongue was so wide and so long that it looked like a country road. The two fugitives were just about to dive into the sea when the shark sneezed very suddenly, and as he sneezed, he gave Pinocchio and Geppetto such a jolt that they found themselves thrown on their backs and dashed once more and very unceremoniously into the stomach of the monster. To make matters worse, the candle went out, and father and son were left in the dark.
And now?
asked Pinocchio with a serious face.
Now we are lost.
Why lost? Give me your hand, dear father, and be careful not to slip.
Where will you take me?
We must try again. Come with me and don't be afraid.
With these words, Pinocchio took his father by the hand and, always walking on tiptoes, they climbed up the monster's throat for a second time. Then they crossed the whole tongue and jumped over 3 rows of teeth. But before they took the last great leap, the marionette said to his father,
Climb on my back and hold on tightly to my neck. I'll take care of everything else.
As soon as Geppetto was comfortably seated on his shoulders, Pinocchio, very sure of what he was doing, dived into the water and started to swim. The sea was like oil, and the moon shone in all splendor, and the shark continued to sleep so soundly that not even a cannon shot would have woken him. And that was chapter 35 of Pinocchio. Brave little Pinocchio has escaped the terrible shark with his father Geppetto. Let's hope safety will await them once they reach the shore. In the final chapter of Pinocchio, chapter 36, our puppet friend Pinocchio is near to becoming a boy. Let's see if he can finally learn from his mistakes. In this last chapter of Pinocchio on Storytime. My dear father, we are saved, cried the marionette. All we have to do now is to get to the shore, and that is easy. Without another word, he swam swiftly away in an effort to reach land as soon as possible. All at once he noticed that Geppetto was shivering and shaking as if with a high fever. Was he shivering from fear or from cold? Who knows? Perhaps a little of both. But Pinocchio, thinking his father was frightened, tried to comfort him by saying, "Courage, father! In a few moments we shall be safe on land." "But where is that blessed shore?" asked the little old man, more and more worried as he tried to pierce the faraway shadows. "Here I am, searching on all sides, and I see nothing but the sea and sky." "I see the shore," said the marionette. "Remember, father, that I am like a cat. I see better at night than by day." Poor Pinocchio pretended to be peaceful and contented, but he was far from that. He was beginning to feel
discouraged. His strength was leaving him, and his breathing was becoming more and more laboured. He felt he could not go on much longer, and the shore was still far away. He swam a few more strokes. Then he turned to Geppetto and cried out weakly, "Help me, father! Help, for I'm dying!" Father and son were really about to drown when they heard a voice, like a guitar out of tune, call from the sea.
What is the trouble?
"It is I, and my poor father."
I know the voice. You are Pinocchio.
"Exactly. And you?"
I am the tunny, your companion in the shark's stomach.
"And how did you escape?"
I imitated your example. You are the one who showed me the way, and after you went, I followed.
"Tunny, you arrived at the right moment. I implore you, for the love of your dear children, the little tunnies, to help us, or we are lost."
With great pleasure indeed. Hang on to my tail, both of you, and let me lead you. In a twinkling you will be safe on land.
Geppetto and Pinocchio, as you can easily imagine, did not refuse the invitation. Indeed, instead of hanging onto the tail, they thought it better to climb onto the tunny's back. "Are we too heavy?" asked Pinocchio.
"Heavy? Not in the least. You are as light as seashells,"
answered the tunny, who was as large as a 2-year-old horse. As soon as they reached the shore, Pinocchio was the first to jump the ground to help his old father. Then he turned to the fish and said to him, "Dear friend, you have saved my father, and I have not enough words with which to thank you. Allow me to embrace you as a sign of my eternal gratitude." The tunny stuck his nose out of the water, and Pinocchio knelt on the sand and kissed him most affectionately on his cheek. At this warm greeting, the poor tunny, who was not used to such tenderness, wept like a child. He felt so embarrassed and ashamed that he quickly plunged into the sea and disappeared. In the meantime, day had dawned. Pinocchio offered his arm to Geppetto, who was so weak he could hardly stand, and said to him, "Lean on my arm, dear father, and let us go. We will walk very, very slowly, and if we feel tired, we can rest by the wayside."
"And where are we going?"
asked Geppetto. "To look for a house or a hut where they will be kind enough to give us a bite of bread and a bit of straw to sleep on." They had not taken 100 steps when they saw 2 rough-looking individuals sitting on a stone begging for alms. It was the fox and the cat, but one could hardly recognize them. They looked so miserable. The cat, after pretending to be blind for so many years, had really lost the sight of both eyes, and the fox, old, thin, and almost hairless, had even lost his tail. That sly thief had fallen into deepest poverty, and one day he had been forced to sell his beautiful tail for a bite to eat.
"Oh, Pinocchio,"
he cried in a tearful voice.
"Give us some alms. We beg of you. We are old and tired and sick."
"Sick," repeated the cat.
Adieu, false friends,
answered the marionette. "You cheated me once, but you will never catch me again."
"Believe us. Today we are truly poor and starving. Starving, repeated the cat. If you are poor, you deserve it. Remember the old proverb which says, stolen money never bears fruit. Adieu, false friends. Have mercy on us. On us. Adieu, false friends. Remember the old proverb which says, bad wheat always makes poor bread. Do not abandon us. Abandon us, repeated the cat. Adieu, false friends. Remember the old proverb, whoever steals his neighbour's shirt usually dies without his own. Waving goodbye to them, Pinocchio and Geppetto went calmly on their way. After a few more steps, they saw, at the end of a long road near a clump of trees, a tiny cottage built of straw. Someone must live in that little hut, said Pinocchio. Let us see for ourselves. They went and knocked at the door. Who is it for? Said a little voice from within. A poor father and a poorer son, without food and with no roof to cover them, answered the marionette. Turn the key and the door will open, said the same little voice. Pinocchio turned the key and the door opened. As soon as they went in, they looked here, there, and everywhere, but saw no one. Oh ho! Who is the owner of the hut? Cried Pinocchio, very much surprised. Here I am, up here. Father and son looked up to the ceiling, and there on a beam sat the talking cricket. Oh, my dear cricket, said Pinocchio, bowing politely. Oh, now you call me your dear cricket. But do you remember when you threw a hammer at me to kill me? You are right, dear cricket. Throw a hammer at me now. I deserve it. But spare my poor old dear father. I am going to spare both the father and the son. I have only wanted to remind you of the trick you long ago played on me, to teach you that in this world of ours we must be kind and courteous to others, if we want to find kindness and courtesy in our own days of trouble. You are right, little cricket. You are more than right. I shall remember the lesson you have taught me. But will you tell me how you have succeeded in buying this pretty little cottage? This cottage was given to me yesterday by a little goat with blue hair, asked Pinocchio. I don't know. And when will she come back? She will never come back. Yesterday she went away bleating sadly, and it seemed to me she said, Poor Pinocchio, I shall never see him again. The shark must have eaten him by this time. Were those her real words? Then it was she. It was my dear little fairy, cried out Pinocchio, sobbing bitterly. After he had cried a long time, he wiped his eyes, and then he made a bed of straw for old Geppetto. He laid him on it, and he said to the talking cricket, Tell me, little cricket, where shall I find a glass of milk for my poor father? 3 fields away from here lives Farmer John. He has some cows. Go there and he will give you what you want. Pinocchio ran all the way to Farmer John's house. The farmer said to him, How much milk do you want? I want a full glass. A full glass costs a penny. First give me the penny. I have no penny, answered Pinocchio, sad and ashamed. Very bad. my marionette," answered the farmer. "Very bad. If you have no penny, I have no milk."
"Too bad,"
said Pinocchio, and started to go. "Wait a moment," said Farmer John. "Perhaps we can come to terms. Do you know how to draw water from a well?"
"I can try."
"Then go to that well you see yonder and draw 100 bucketfuls of water."
"Very well."
"After you have finished, I shall give you a glass of warm, sweet milk."
"I am satisfied."
Farmer John took the marionette to the well and showed him how to draw the water. Pinocchio set to work as well as he knew how, but long before he had pulled up the 100 buckets, he was tired out and dripping with perspiration. He had never worked so hard in his life. "Until today," said the farmer, "my donkey has drawn water for me, but now that poor animal is dying."
"Will you take me to see him?"
said Pinocchio. As soon as Pinocchio went into the stable, he spied a little donkey lying on a bed of straw in the corner of the stable. He was worn out from hunger and too much work. After looking at him a long time, he said to himself,
"I know that donkey. I have seen him before."
And bending low over him, he asked, "Who are you?" At this question, the donkey opened his weary, dying eyes and answered in the same tongue,
"I am Lampwick."
Then he closed his eyes and died.
"Oh, my poor Lampwick,"
said Pinocchio in a faint voice as he wiped his eyes with some straw he had picked up from the ground. "Do you feel so sorry for a little donkey that has cost you nothing?" said the farmer. "What should I do? I have paid my good money for him."
"But you see, he was my friend."
"Your friend?"
"A classmate of mine."
"What?" shouted Farmer John, bursting out laughing. "What? You had a donkey in your school? How you must have studied!" The marionette, ashamed and hurt by these words, did not answer, but taking his glass of milk, returned to his father. From that day on, for more than 5 months, Pinocchio got up every morning, just as dawn was breaking, and went to the farm to draw water. And every day he was given a glass of warm milk for his poor old father, who grew stronger and better day by day. But he was not satisfied with this. He learnt to make baskets of reeds and sold them. With the money he received, he and his father were able to keep from starving. Among other things, he built a rolling chair, strong and comfortable, to take his old father out for an airing on bright sunny days. In the evening, the marionette studied by lamplight, and with some of the money he earned, he bought himself a second-hand volume that had a few pages missing, and with that he learnt to read in a very short time. As far as writing was concerned, he used a long stick at one end of which he had whittled a long fine point. Ink he had none, so he used the juice of blackberries or cherries. Little by little his diligence was rewarded. He succeeded not only in his studies, but also in his work. And a day came when he put enough money together to keep his old father comfortable and happy. Besides this, he was able to save the great amount of 50 pennies. With it, he wanted to buy himself a new suit. One day, he said to his father, "I am going to the marketplace to buy myself a coat, a cap, and a pair of shoes. When I come back, I'll be so dressed up, you will think I am a rich man." He ran out of the house and up the road to the village, laughing and singing. Suddenly he heard his name called, and looking around to see whence the voice came, he noticed
a large snail crawling out of some bushes.
Don't you recognize me?
Said the snail.
Yes and no.
Do you not remember the snail that lived with the fairy with azure hair? Do you not remember how she opened the door for you one night and gave you something to eat?
I remember everything, cried Pinocchio. Answer me quickly, pretty snail. Where have you left my fairy? What is she doing? Has she forgiven me? Does she remember me? Does she still love me? Is she very far away from here? May I see her?
At all these questions, tumbling out one after another, the snail answered, calm as ever.
My dear Pinocchio, the fairy is lying ill in a hospital.
In a hospital? Yes, indeed. She has been stricken with trouble and illness and hasn't a penny left with which to buy a bite of bread.
Really? Oh, how sorry I am. My poor dear little fairy.
If I had 1,000,000, I should run to her with it. But I have only 50 pennies. Here they are. I was just going to buy some clothes. Here, take them, little snail, and give them to my good fairy. What about the new clothes? What does that matter? I should like to sell these rags I have on to help her more. Go and hurry. Come back here within a couple of days, and I hope to have more money for you. Until today I've worked for my father. Now I shall have to work for my mother also. Goodbye, and I hope to see you soon. The snail, much against her usual habit, began to run like a lizard under a summer sun. When Pinocchio returned home, his father asked him, "And where is the new suit?" "I couldn't find one to fit me. I shall have to look again some other day." That night Pinocchio, instead of going to bed at 10 o'clock, waited until midnight. And instead of making 8 baskets, he made 16. After that he went to bed and fell asleep. As he slept, he dreamed of his fairy, beautiful, smiling and happy, who kissed him and said to him, "Bravo, Pinocchio! In reward for your kind heart, I forgive you for your old mischief. Boys who love and take good care of their parents when they are old and sick deserve praise, even though they may not be held up as models of obedience and good behavior. Keep on doing so well, and you will be happy." At that very moment, Pinocchio awoke and opened wide his eyes. What was his surprise and his joy when, on looking himself over, he saw he was no longer a marionette, but that he had become a real, live boy. He looked all about him, and instead of the usual walls of straw, he found himself in a beautifully furnished little room, the prettiest he had ever seen. In a twinkling, he jumped up from his bed to look on the chair standing near. Then he found a new suit, a new hat, and a new pair of shoes. As soon as he was dressed, he put his hand in his pockets and pulled out a little leather purse on which were written the following words: "The fairy with azure hair returns 50 pennies to her dear Pinocchio, with many thanks for his kind heart." The marionette opened the purse to find the money, and behold, there were 50 50 gold coins! Pinocchio ran to the mirror. He hardly recognized himself. The bright face of a tall boy looked at him with wide-awake blue eyes, dark brown hair, and happy, smiling lips. Surrounded by so much splendor, the marionette hardly knew what he was doing. He rubbed his eyes 2 or 3 times, wondering if he was still asleep or awake, and decided he must be awake. "And where is Father?" he cried suddenly. He ran into the next room, and there stood Geppetto, grown years younger overnight, spick and span in his new clothes, and gay as a lark in the morning. He was once more Mastro Geppetto, the woodcarver, hard at work on a lovely picture frame, decorating it with flowers and leaves and heads of animals. "Father, Father, what has happened? Tell me if you can!" cried Pinocchio, as he ran and jumped on his father's neck. "This sudden change in our house is all your doing, my dear Pinocchio," answered Geppetto. "What have I to do with it?" "Just this. When bad boys become good and kind, they have the power of making their homes gay and new with happiness. I wonder where the old Pinocchio of wood has hidden himself." "There he is," answered Geppetto, and he pointed to a large marionette leaning against a chair, head turned to one side, arms hanging limp, and legs twisted under him. After a long, long look, Pinocchio said to himself with great content, "How ridiculous I was as a marionette! And how happy I am now that I have become a real boy." And that was the final chapter of Pinocchio. Despite his crazy mishap adventures, Pinocchio has grown from being a carpenter's puppet to a good boy and a wonderful son. Let no one say this story isn't full of many morals.